This is StoryBeat, Storytellers on Storytelling, an exploration into how master storytellers and artists develop and build brilliant stories and works of art that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators of all kinds find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guests today are the exceptionally talented, multi-award-winning screenwriters, librettists, and producers, Cheri and Bill Steinkellner. Cheri and Bill have several Emmys, Golden Globes, and Writers Guild Awards for writing and producing Cheers, plus a few more Emmys, British Academy Awards, and Parents' Choice honors for the animated series and critically acclaimed feature musical, Disney's Teacher's Pet, created with mad artist Gary Baseman. On Broadway, they're the Tony-nominated authors of Sister Act the Musical, working with no less than Alan Menken and Glenn Slater. And Bill co-wrote the PeeWee Herman Show in both 1980 and 2010. Off-Broadway, they wrote the books for Princesses with David Zippel and Matthew Wilder, Jailbirds on Broadway with Jeff Rizzo, and Cheri is the Ovation-nominated Indy-winning author of Hello, My Baby, Tonight in Dreamland, and the upcoming It's All Material. The Steinkellners met as charter members of the Groundlings. Other TV credits include The Jeffersons, Benson, The Facts of Life, Family Ties, Who's the Boss, Bob, as in Newhart, and Hope and Gloria. They're the creators of Instaplay, LA's original all-improvised musical, a performance of which I happened to attend way back in the day. As educators, Bill and Cheri are the honored recipients of UCSB's 2015 Inspiration Award for Teaching. Additionally, Bill teaches sitcom writing at USC, and Cheri teaches comedy and creative writing at Stanford University. Well, it is an incredible honor and great pleasure for me to welcome to StoryBeat Cheri and Bill Steinkellner. I'm so glad you could join me today. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
It's just terrific to have you. Obviously, you're very well known for your work in TV comedy, but you've been writing a lot of theater in the last few years. What is it about theater that draws you to it? It surely can't be the money.
Well, that's what TV was for.
Yeah.
Good. And so what brings you to theater?
Well, you know, it's interesting because all of the TV shows that you mentioned were also, in their own way, theater. They were
true.
Shot in front of a live studio audience. So there's that sense of the conversation going back and forth between the stage and the audience that I think is really exciting and really live and appealing to us, to me. How about you, Billy?
I love that. And in television, with a live studio audience is about 250 people.
Yeah.
So when you have literally thousands of live people, hopefully, laugh at a joke or really appreciate it or, stand up at the end and all that, it's hard to beat that. It's really, really exciting thing to, it's millions in TV, but you don't really see them. So, it could be 50 people that are actually watching your show and you wouldn't know it.
Sure. And so it's the excitement of the live feedback that you get in theater that makes it exciting for you.
Yeah,
right?
it's fantastic.
It's the audience.
It is the audience, and I've certainly been involved in enough theater to know when they're not live, it's not good.
Yeah.
So and you have focused, particularly Cheri, on musicals, but also Bill with Sister Act. What is it about musicals that draws you in?
Musicals actually drew us in. The first thing that we wrote for the stage was a play called Our Place back in the early 80s.
Okay.
It was a comedy, but I've always loved musicals. I grew up on my mom's albums, laying on my belly on the floor in Orange County listening to my mom's albums. But Billy, I don't think you had an early...
No. As a matter of fact, one of the first things I discovered when we were together is just boyfriend and girlfriend, and we'd be driving along, and Cheri would say, name a musical. And I would go like, oh, okay, Oliver. And then she would sing all the songs from Oliver.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is my girlfriend now, you know.
And my radio station.
Yeah, but no, it's really fun. I would say that the thing about writing musicals, being the book writers, I mean, neither of us writes music. Cheri writes lyrics, but neither of us writes music. And so you get to ride along on that same train, basically, you know, and it's really fun. And it's really fun because sometimes this is a little ego deflating, but you'll just really, this is a great idea for like a scene, and then they go like, hey, it's an even better idea for a song.
Oh,
and you
yes.
go, oh, okay.
Oh, yes.
And it's true, you know, so it's really fun.
It was, you know, as you know, that I created Jekyll and Hyde the musical, and it is very challenging to decide where to spot songs. And so when a composer says, "Hey, there's the spot for a song," you have to let your playwriting words go away. So that is difficult.
Yes.
And yet it can be gratifying too, because nobody really knows where it begins and ends, though everyone knows where the song begins and ends. So
yeah, well, this sits probe is one of the most exciting things ever.
Do you want to define the sits probe?
Sure.
I know you do.
Steve, do you?
Yeah, no, I'm
even better
curious
if
to
Steve did
know,
it.
what is the sits probe? It sounds painful.
The sits
Yeah, well, it could be.
Well,
there's two kinds, and the painful
go
one.
to Area 54. No, it's the first time that the entire orchestra assembles, having played through the music, and meets the cast, and they sing and play together,
Really?
usually in the lobby of the theater, and it's just thrilling. You hear
it's
things
fantastic.
you've never heard before.
Sure. And I've learned something new. I did not know that term. That's really good to know. Sits probe. That's
I guess it's Sitz probe. Right?
Sits probe. It's got to be. Is that German? I assume it's German.
Yeah, I think so.
So okay. So when what was the first musical that you worked on? Was it Sister Act, or was it something before that?
No, we did a musical. The first one was Jailbirds on Broadway.
Yeah.
Which, funnily enough, we're actually pulling back into the world 30 years later.
Wow.
It's kind of as if Adler and Ross or Strauss and Adams wrote Orange is the New Black.
Really?
It's a women's prison musical comedy, very high energy, fun musical comedy that was based on an Instaplay that we had done back in the day, back before all those TV things that you mentioned happened.
Yes.
And so we wrote that about 30-some years ago, just because it seemed like it would be really fun, and it was.
It was.
And okay, so I also, you know, in terms of musicals, obviously it goes way back because we talked about Instaplay. I saw you do something at the Cass Theater called, it wound up being titled, Leave It to Jesus. It was one of the funniest nights I've ever spent in the theater. So
yes, those were titles suggested by the audience, and then we would do them. So
Yes.
Jailbirds on Broadway was a title that just somebody in the audience came up with.
Is that
and the
right?
audience voted on it and loved it, and so.
And then we improvised it. We improvised the music, the lyrics, the story, Billy's side coaches, and 5 of us. By the way, Steve, if you're back in L.A. at the right time, a bunch of us still do Instaplay on occasion.
Seriously?
It's a curiosity.
Wow. I would love to see that. It literally, it was, I was working on a show at the cast at the time, and you were in there, and we stayed after rehearsal to watch. It was spectacular. It was like, how are you doing this? It was a complete mystery.
Yeah, we barely knew how we were doing it, so.
So
it was crazy.
You don't look down.
Yeah.
When you're flying without a net, you don't look down.
We actually had a really great deal because we just rented the theater, you know, after the show that was presently there was going on. Closed for the night, we would do the show on their set. So
Sure.
we just did different sets, like, for 2 or 3 years.
What show were you doing there, Steve?
That was a show called Strider.
Oh, yeah, Strider.
Strider.
It was
yes.
directed by Matt Casella, if you know Matt, who's a casting
Yeah,
director.
that must have been, was Les Moonves involved with that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, because I was thinking they were doing a lot. That whole crowd was, I can't remember the name of the group, but it was really a lot of people have gone on to do some wonderful, interesting things.
It starred Peter Frechette, who has gone on to do a lot of great
Oh,
things.
sure,
Yes,
yeah.
So yes, and it was that was a fabulous show. And that was in my old life. I was also a lighting designer in the theater. I designed the lighting for that show. So that's before I was making money as a writer. I was lighting. So anyway, enough about me because nobody cares.
I don't think so.
we do. You're new to us.
So what I'm curious about from when you get involved in a musical, whether it's way back when or whether you're reviving it or whether you're doing something newer like Sister Act, how do you approach writing the book? What's your first step when somebody says, okay, here's the story? What is your first approach to writing the book for a musical?
Well, because Sister Act is playing in so many places, it might be great to answer that with Sister Act.
Sure.
The model as the model. Disney came to us. We had done an animated series called Teacher's Pet that you mentioned.
Yep.
And it starred Nathan Lane as a little blue dog who wants to go to 4th grade with his boys. So he puts on a hat and shorts, and nobody knows he's a dog because it's a cartoon.
Of course.
And because Nathan Lane was voicing the character, we kept putting songs into it. And then it became a feature, and we made it a movie musical. And Tom Schumacher was our producer at Disney at the time. And it became apparent that we had this gift for writing the gazintas and the gazautas, to writing scenes into song and out of song and telling the story with the song weaving through it.
Mm-hmm.
So we were approached by Disney with their catalog to not do a Disney stage musical, but something that would be for not for a family audience necessarily. And we looked at a number of the musicals. Billy, I'll hand it over to you from here.
Really?
You want it?
I would just say I can't remember. There was half a page of them and all that. One I just remember was maybe Hoops that they.
The basketball movie?
The basketball movie.
Hoops.
And obviously one was Sister Act. And I thought, well, Sister Act is a story. I mean, I think that's really crucial. I mean, countless times you hear people like they want to do, a musical about Transformers or whatever, and you go like, okay, what's the story of Transformers, And if you've got a story, you're way ahead of the game. And if you don't, it's really hard to make a musical out of it. And
Sure.
I think that's what they, the sword that many a musical has fallen on is they don't really have a story. But they'd already had one, and of course it's Ball of Fire and it's Some Like It Hot. I mean, it's basically that same plot. And
Hiding out to save your life.
yeah, and so that sounds like fun. So we went with that.
Also, the other thing about Sister Act that made it a really appealing film to stage adaptation is it had a very organic reason for singing. She is a singer, Dolores is a singer, the nuns are a choir, so there are these diegetic songs that are part of the story that they're telling.
Sure.
As well as the book songs, which basically express their feelings.
So in a sense, it makes constructing the musical itself a little easier because there are natural insertion points for songs.
It sings for a reason.
Yeah.
Organically. They're not just, cowboys breaking into song. So that was thing one. So we looked at the movie and we thought about it a lot and thought, okay, we could just kind of do the movie. And that was something that was discussed at length. Meetings were taken about doing the movie with the existing girl group material.
Right.
My Guy and I Will Follow Him, and then adding additional songs
Sure.
to it. And that, for a number of reasons, we didn't follow that thread. We had this idea, Billy and I, of updating it a little bit, moving it into the disco era. And the reason it felt really appealing to us is because if you're going to spend the whole evening in a convent, in a musical, where every nun's body is covered head to toe to fingertip in a habit, then when you break out of that, you're going to want to break out with something that's going to be really vivid and exciting to the eye. And that's where the whole disco, the color, the glitz, all of that was really exciting and interesting to us. The music made a lot of sense to us, and the disco era, moving to the disco era, so that you could really play up the difference between the sacred in the convent and the profanity of disco. The word God has an entirely different use in the disco genre.
Yes.
So it just made a lot of sense to us. So we started developing the story in that vernacular, and along with that, period-wise, the whole Shaft, what they called the blaxploitation film genre,
Right.
seemed like a really natural adaptation for the gangsters. So rather than them just being mafiosos, we were going into the world of Shaft and all of that kind of Foxy Brown and all that. And so that music became a real exciting thing too. And that really attracted Alan Menken and Glenn, who at the time were already writing a gospel musical, so they didn't want to write gospel, or couldn't write gospel. That was already going into Leap of Faith. But this was not going to be gospel. This was all disco. And so those are the origins of that.
Okay, so this is interesting to me because you're taking an existing work, you're adapting it for a slightly different medium, and you have made decisions based on, I guess, practical reasons why you needed to make changes to it in order to accommodate this different medium. And so those decisions, that you're saying that those were well discussed by the powers that be?
They were moderately discussed by the powers that be. It was just something we sort of said, hey, does this work? And everybody kind of said, hey, yeah, it does. And that was what it was.
Got it. So in other words, it's helpful, by the way, and most musicals, certainly most modern musicals, come from some underlying source. They're not whole cloth original. And so it does help to have that material, because it's one of the challenges in writing a musical, I know for a fact certain, is that an audience comes in, hears new music for the first time, and they can sometimes not understand what the lyrics are saying. So it helps to understand what the story is so that they don't get totally lost. So in your case, it's a beloved movie, and that helps.
It does, and like Billy said, we know the story. We know what's basically going to happen. She's going to witness a shooting and have to be hid out, and we're going to end up in this convent, and lives are going to change. Right.
Okay, so that's a fascinating way to go, because many people don't understand that in an adaptation you're entitled to go ahead and make changes like that. I think that's important to understand.
Yes, and it's also a risk. There have been along the way people who have said, hey, where's my guy?
Right, sure. Sure, you're definitely playing with somebody's notion of what perfection is, and how dare you do that, but those decisions must be made. So speaking of beloved, obviously you've worked on some of TV's most beloved sitcoms, in particular Cheers, that you executive produced. For those out there who have no idea what it's like to work on a sitcom, give us an idea of what the day-to-day life of a sitcom writer is. What do you do? What do you go through?
Well, there's a song.
Well, name a day. Which day is it?
So the day that you're breaking story. Let's start there.
Okay. We, as writers, producers, and executive producers, and depending on what title you see, that kind of goes up the food chain. The longer you last and the better you do, the higher you go till you're a showrunner and a creator. To break a story, we get a head start. The actors take a long hiatus from about May or June to about August. Mm-hmm. And during that time, we sit in a room and think of what would be funny to us.
You and a group of other writers, right? It's not just you two, or is it just you two?
No. It's, well, if you're lucky, you're with a great functional writing staff.
Right.
And working as a group, because it's an out loud medium anyway. So in our rooms, it's always, bring all your ideas, bring the best ideas, bring the worst ideas, say them, and let's see what we got.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try and have a really very free-flowing, freewheeling atmosphere so that people can just throw stuff into the center and other people, it's kind of like a volleyball team. Somebody sets it up, somebody else will spike it.
We only had one rule, which was if you left the room during the discussion of something for like an hour or two, and you came back and we had already figured something out, you couldn't say, I don't think that works.
That makes sense.
Because that's just not helpful at all, and it just pisses everybody off, basically. If it doesn't eventually work, well, you'll change it. But if you miss all the discussion of why you're not doing it another way, then you really miss something.
That's a valid way to go. Okay, so you've now got a bunch of ideas. What do we do with those?
Right. Often the ideas come from our own trials and travails. I wouldn't say tribulations.
I thought you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say the
stories.
tragedies of your lives.
Well, tragedy plus distance or time. No, we people will come in the morning and usually vent. And venting is actually good because venting is tied to emotion, usually big emotions about little things. And sitcom stories love to be big emotions about little things because they can be solved in 20, well, it used to be 26 minutes. Now I think it's 18 minutes.
Is it 18 now? It was 22 last time I looked.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's ridiculously short.
Not a lot.
But you have to have something that you don't necessarily solve it, but you come to some kind of resolution or reset. And so in order to be able to do that, it has to be fairly easily resolved, unless it's a two-parter or a season arc.
Sure.
So a lot of these stories come from somebody in the room saying, oh, my God, has this ever happened to you? And talking about something dumb or annoying or irritating or frustrating that happened. And then we start blowing it up. And a lot of stories came from bad neighbors, traffic tickets, just
the first script we ever did there that was produced. We actually didn't work on Cheers yet, but there's a freelance script. Came from a real life situation that they changed a little bit, but it was basically the same concept.
Right.
Somebody had borrowed money from us and then didn't pay it back, but at the same time was taking vacations, ordering out from expensive restaurants and buying people gifts, but not paying us back. And so that became our first Cheers episode called I'll Gladly Pay You Tuesday, where Diane buys a first edition Hemingway. Sam loans her $500. And
sure, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was our first episode and an episode in real life.
And okay, so do you know when you're sitting there with stories, do you know how they're going to resolve, or does that get worked out later?
Sometimes both, I think. Don't you think, Billy?
Yeah, most of the time you sort of resolve it. Or you sort of hopefully have resolved it, and then you find out later, oh, that didn't resolve it at all. But in general, you try to get the whole story, beat for beat to the end, and then you change a lot of stuff in the middle. Sometimes we'll change it. We'll have something and then change it, and then it doesn't work, and then we say, remove the improvements, and then we go back to that story and try to find how to make it work.
Okay, and then
during the kind of sitcom, the multicam that our experience is in, you're rewriting every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
The cast on Monday, the cast reads the script out loud for the first time, and you see all the things that are wrong with it, and you hear all the things that are wrong with it, and you try to resolve all of those. On Tuesday, they put it up on its feet and stumble through it for the first time, and the actors now have more an investment, and they will give you their input, and and we'll also see for ourselves what needs to be improved. And on through the week, we usually have to freeze it to some degree by Thursday because that's when we get cameras and sound in. So we have to set marks, and the people have to know where they're going so that they'll be on camera and microphone.
But we've jumped over a kind of an important step that I wanted to make sure we covered, which is somebody had to take that idea and actually turn it into a script, didn't they?
Oh, the writing.
The writing part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so backing up to that. We'll come up with a lot of stories in the room at the beginning of hiatus, and then everybody will go to their own offices, desks, homes, Hawaiis.
Do you assign it? Do you make the assignments?
Write scripts. And usually you spend the first step in that will be to write a detailed outline or a treatment that really is like telling the whole story in prose. And that's so that we can check the storytelling and make sure that all of the characters that need to be served are properly served, that the beats work. And we'll go over that sometimes just us as the executive producers, and sometimes the whole group will go over the outline or the treatment. Then that writer or those writers will be turned around and sent to first draft. And they'll take a couple of weeks and turn it into script. I think for the most part, we were using back in those days we had scriptware. Or maybe we would even just tab over. But now
I thought we used hammer and chisel.
Now I think it's final draft, and you turn in a script that looks, feels, and sounds like a script. And then we'll give notes on that based on what resembles what we like from what we originally pitched, and what we've learned along the way that just doesn't feel like it's working. And all the time, Steve, you're going on past knowledge of how the show works and how the actors respond to different things and how the audience responds. But you're also going on gut and just going, I think this will work or not.
Yeah.
Well, of course, go ahead.
The key thing is story. It's always story. I mean, jokes are pretty easy by comparison. They're not easy to come up with a great joke, but they're much easier because if your story doesn't work, it doesn't make any difference about anything else. You have to make that story work, and if it works, then you can it's like a Christmas tree. You can just add on all these baubles and shiny things and that makes it work.
And thus the reason why it's called a situation comedy, because
exactly.
If that story doesn't work out, otherwise it's just a series of jokes.
Yeah.
Right, you can do sketch comedy where you've just got characters. I don't want to say just in a diminishing way, but you've got characters, and the comedy comes because we know, recognize, and love these characters.
Mm-hmm.
But most of your long-run situation comedies are running that long because they're finding new ways to tell stories or new ways to tell old stories or new stories.
But as you say, it's got to be story first, and maybe as importantly, that we do develop these characters that the audience loves and invests themselves in. If the audience is not invested in those characters, they're not going to stick around no matter how funny your jokes are.
Yep.
And so when you go to develop characters, or let's say there's a guest character that comes on, something like that, is there a process that you go through? Is there something that you typically do to develop a new character? Is there some kind of methodology to it?
Well, going back to Cheers, because we created the character of Lilith and a number of Robin Colcord, a number of characters where you don't know initially if it's going to work. It needs to work in the moment to fill the needs of that particular story that you're telling the first time they come on. But in the case of Bebe Neuwirth, when she came on in the first episode, I think it was called The Second Time Around, she was playing Frasier's bad date. And then that was supposed to be just a setup for the good date where we were going to have a whole story arc where Frasier fell in love with a girl who was, I think it was Jennifer Tilly played her, who was the opposite of Frasier, as opposed to Lilith, who was the mirror image, the female image of Frasier.
Sure.
But we cast the show, we filmed the show. It was a very good episode, and what we learned was that there was magic between Bebe and Kelsey, between Frasier and Lilith. That was just too much fun to ignore. And so rather than keeping the character that we originally thought we were going to keep, and by the way, she did a great job.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of, oh, good job, bad job, good story, bad story. It was like chemistry, that X quantity that you can't predict but know it when you see it.
And it was still a year later, right? That was like the whole next season before she was on again.
That we brought her back, yeah.
Yeah. So for actors out there, never give up,
right,
I guess.
Did the audience send you letters or anything? Were there demands for it?
I think the brothers, the Charles brothers, just said no. Yeah, they said, "Oh, let's get Frasier a girlfriend, like a steady girlfriend." And we thought, well, they're gonna, go with the one who was in the entire episode. And then later, like, no, the one who was at the beginning and all that. Yeah, I like her.
Yeah, they had the golden gut.
The Charles brothers.
They knew what they were doing.
Glenn and Les Charles, who created Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, clearly they were doing something right, because that was tremendous effort. Now, when you're working on a show like that, especially as executive producers, my imagination, I've never been an executive producer on a show like that ever, so my imagination tells me that there are pressures galore on a daily basis. What kind of pressures did you endure, and how would you deal with them?
How would we deal with them now or then?
Well, no, then.
Oh.
We couldn't deal with them now because we'd go, "What's that?" I don't know. Well, there was a lot of pressure, but there was less pressure, I think, than now in a way, especially in Cheers, because it was an accepted show, it was a hit show, and then if you have a hit show, the powers that be leave you alone, like the network and the studio, they leave you alone. And so then you can do your work. It's when the network and the studio sometimes insist on things, and then you do that more and more. I've consulted on a bunch of shows, and it's amazing how much they, people who don't write tell you how to write. But
sure.
But and the pressure. I think the worst pressure was always like if the very end didn't work, and then you're just pitching lines for the last line of the show, and that's not fun at all. What did you find that was pressure-filled? Well, you took more pressure than I did, Cheri.
Why did you take more pressure, Cheri?
I think she's because it's definitely boys' club in many ways, and Cheri had to basically be as she always says, the Wendy to the Lost Boys, and we were Lost Boys. I mean, if we could have dressed up as Native Americans and put on war paint and stuff at work every day, we would have been delighted with that.
Were you the only female in the room? Were you the only female in the room?
I was. Often we would have a freelance writer, and occasionally we had another female staffer, just a couple in the 7 or 8 years that I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we had a female writer's assistant for some time, but no, I was pretty much holding down the distaff side.
And Cheri was the best.
Thanks,
I'm not just saying that because I have to live with her for the next 40 years.
Oh, good. You get that much?
Yeah,
wow.
Maybe not. I'm shooting for 100, so 32.
I'm delighted we've got the timing on that out.
Yeah.
That's a lot of math for me.
So, Cheri? Did you feel pressure as the only female in the room that would be definitely different than the guys?
No. At the time, I was kind of in an ignorance is bliss state. Now, looking back, I can see that it existed. I just didn't know it. I was too busy really getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure comes from a constantly ticking clock, and also from the fact that you are having to, on any given day of the week, you're living in the present, doing the show that is on the stage and needs to be rewritten today. You're living in the past, trying to edit and do any kinds of corrections that need to be done on whatever we shot last week or the week before. And you're also living in the future, getting next week's show ready and next month's scripts ready. So that, that juggling act, that is a real trick. And
it's all coming at you at the same time,
there.
right? It's all coming at one time. It's not like it's a nice neat process.
Oh yeah, every day you are doing all of those things. And then if there's a curveball, if somebody has a meltdown, if somebody has a baby, or doesn't.
I guest star calls you the day before and says, I don't think I want to do the show.
Oh, wow. Really?
Right, yeah. Oh, we can name names.
Yeah.
So if you get any kind of a curveball, you've got to deal with that in real time if somebody's not coming out of their dressing room, as well as get everything done because the clock doesn't stop.
Okay, so my question to you then is, when that sounds like a lot of pressure for nothing less than a top-rated primetime television show, which clearly is, there's a lot of focus on that. How do you handle that pressure? Did you have a method? Did you have a way to not feel pressured, or how did you deal with the pressure?
Oh, now I remember. She yelled at her husband. No, Cheri's the Energizer Bunny. She's like, no matter what you throw her way, she just kind of handles it, and it's amazing. I mean, one of the most amazing women on earth.
Thanks, man. It's okay. Like the Energizer Bunny, though, I would have to not really see and not really hear. I would just have to wind up and go, and just keep checking things off and getting it done as best we could.
You put blinders on, essentially. You just did the job and dug in.
For me, I had to. And that's why a lot of the things, including being the only female in the room, when I would hear that somebody had said something about that, it's like, what? What does that have to do with anything? That doesn't get the job done.
Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the great qualities Cheri has that a lot of TV executive producers don't have is the willingness to make a decision. She'll just make a decision, and then we go with it. And if it doesn't work out, then we can change it. But I worked a number of places where I'll work on a show, the consult on a show, and I'll talk to Cheri after I've been there for 2.5 hours and all that, and I'll say, they just spent 2.5 hours working on something that should have taken 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that's not great on your staff. It's like baseball. It's working the bullpen too hard. Problems will occur.
Well,
so she would make a decision, and we would just go with it. And they were great decisions, too, by the way.
Well, thanks, pal. Well, I'll throw that back at Billy. Before we worked in TV, we met at the Groundlings, and Billy became the assistant director there. You mentioned that he co-wrote and co-directed the original PeeWee Herman Show.
Yeah.
And was and still is teaching improv, and is the master teacher as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of great improvisers are concerned. And so in addition to making decisions, there's an element of just being trained to, and being willing to improvise. So if I'm holding down if I'm turning the pages and holding down the fort, Billy was a major problem solver in that he was fearless in pitching and would say anything and didn't care if it was stupid or if people thought it was stupid, knowing that, like an improv, if you're brave enough to put it out there and it itself doesn't work, it still might inspire somebody else.
By the way, I also perfected I don't care if this is stupid, even though it's going to hurt my feelings when you think it's stupid face.
Do you find that some comedy writers are inhibited to the point of their own doom?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing you have to remember about comedy is people don't get into comedy because they're happy.
That's true.
They don't. They get in because they're unhappy with things and they want to change things, and they want to get out of it. And some people who are the most miserable people you ever scene are hilarious because they managed to translate that into humor. And comedy is, I think people think comedy is happy-go-lucky. I don't. I think it's just pain. Pain, whether it's recent or 30 years ago or whatever. It's just, but if you can translate that and see the funny side of the pain, then I think you have a chance to make it in comedy.
I think that's pretty wise stuff. Okay, so I want to talk for a moment about collaborating, which obviously the two of you have done for a pretty long time, and then you also collaborate with others in the room as well. Tell the audience for a bit what makes a partnership or a collaboration work, what to avoid, or what will destroy a partnership. I'm sure you've known some partners over time that have busted apart for one reason or another.
Sure.
Talk about collaboration.
I say the key word is trust. I mean, literally trust, because Cheri would always be at the helm, at the computer, the keyboard, and she would. I would pitch stuff, and she would like it or not like it, and it would go in or not go in, depending on whether she liked it or not. And I literally, I wouldn't think to myself in my head, "Oh, this is great! I can't wait to pitch this." I would just pitch it. And so she trusted me to come up with, that often enough that it would be funny. And I trusted her definitely in the story. I mean, sometimes we would discuss it, but if we were both agreed on the story, I trusted, okay, this is going to, this is going to work in the story. And so we'll give it a shot.
Cheri, what
Billy likes to say the only time we would fight, and I don't think it's the only time, but the predictable and reliable time we would fight is always on the first day of a project. We always would have some kind of a battle because neither one of us knew where we were going. Mm-hmm. And we had to get to the other side of that. It's like being lost, and I'm saying, pull over and ask for directions before GPS.
That
or
cliche.
even with GPS, I'm saying, listen to GPS.
She, like many people in my family, she always sides with the machines against me.
GPS knows. It's got a map. Anyway.
I don't want to deal in the Terminator world with you.
U-turn.
So predictably, we would have fights, and we would know it, and we wouldn't even know it when we were getting into it. We would know it once we were deep into it and go, oh, this is that.
Yeah.
So the trust is a big deal. Respect is a big deal.
Yeah.
And sort of being open, being willing to be multi-minded and think, okay, I think maybe that thing that the other person or the other people are liking, I don't get it, but maybe that's just me. Oh, I know. The other thing is, Steve, in a room, if you've got a good room or a functional room, learning to listen to that room, because the room has an intelligence that is greater than anybody's in it.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You're taking advantage of that group think then, yeah?
Without question. And so a good executive producer or showrunner actually knows how to listen to the room and read it and go, oh, we need to go with that.
Would you say that's a problem for a number of shows that don't turn out so well, that the room was not, or that the leader of the group was not listening?
You might have somebody who's trying to impose their own will or ego, or I know best, on the room. You might have rooms that are bifurcated, and the rooms are, it's when egos start getting in the way and people are insisting.
It's the politics of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are still shows that are great and classic and still on the air, won't name names, where you've got that kind of bifurcated duality and egos just sparring, and still the show somehow manages to find its way to greatness.
How do you think
some shows are, the rooms are very quiet, and I don't like that, but it works for that show, or where it's one voice, the creator doesn't really, they know what they want and they're proceeding. I don't quite know how they work, but it works for them. So
So there's a bit of a mystery.
Fun room.
It's a bit of a mystery how that all pulls together then when it.
It
when it
There
shouldn't.
is a mystery, but boy, if you know it, I mean, if you grab it and you see it, go with it. The room, if everybody laughs, they've all laughed for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just a room joke. Sometimes we're just laughing because we're so screwed. It's 4 a.m. and we've been up every night this week and we don't have it, and we'll laugh at anything. And that's a room joke, and you have to know the difference between that and something that's going to play for an audience who's coming to it fresh.
Yeah. A room joke generally involves a number.
A number?
Yeah, because they always say number jokes aren't good because you're doing the math, right? And then so you start to do the math, and okay, and then the joke is over, and they've gone on to other things. So that's our warning. Don't do number jokes.
Don't do number.
Your shows.
Remember that. Don't do number jokes.
Good work.
So let's talk for a brief moment about TV animation, which you've also done. So you created Teacher's Pet, correct?
Indeed.
And
with Gary Baseman.
With Gary Baseman. All right. So how did that come about, and what inspired you to want to do animation?
We had moved to Santa Barbara to raise our children outside the bright lights of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. The dull lights of Santa Barbara, is that where you're going?
We live in Santa Barbara, yeah.
I love Santa Barbara, by the way. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Yeah.
We are really happy here. We've been here for 21 years now. But those first couple of years, when we first moved here, we had this mortgage, see, and we had our savings, see, but we also did that math, that aforementioned math, and realized, oh, gosh, we should probably work some more. But we live here, not there.
Yes.
And we got a call from a man named Roy Price.
Yes.
Who now runs Amazon Studios.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was running, he was working in development at Disney TV Animation. And he said, hey, would you guys like to take a major pay cut and
we're all ears.
create a Saturday morning cartoon series? And we said, well, that depends. By the way, we didn't have any other offers. And we said, that depends. We live in Santa Barbara. Would we have to come in every day? He said, no, we could probably work it out so you come in about once a week. And we went, sold. So Gary Baseman, who is a wonderful, iconic artist. If you've seen the game Cranium, that's Gary. He just is doing all kinds of marvelous things. He had a few ideas, and one of them was Teacher's Pet, where this little dog goes to school.
Right.
And we had our son Teddy, I think, was in the 3rd grade, and so we knew that the worst thing that can happen to a kid when they're in the 3rd or 4th grade is to have something happen that will make you stand out or make you different from everybody else. You just don't want to stick out in a weird way.
Of course not.
And so we created this show called Teacher's Pet about this kid whose mother is the 4th grade teacher, and he's just starting in her class, and that's awful enough. But then his dog decides to go to school because he loves him so much. And so that was the story of
And that dog was Nathan Lane, so you're off to the races.
That's an awfully good start with to have Nathan Lane. That's a big deal.
Yeah, when he came in to do the voice and all that, and he just said like, I think it's something like this, and he just did it. And we were like, oh, okay, and that was literally it. It was just from the word go.
He played Spot and Scott. Spot was Scott when he was a boy.
Yes.
And the other animals were played by Jerry Stiller, played a parakeet.
Right.
And
an unshaven, always with a toothpick in his mouth parakeet.
And then David Ogden Stiers played a big old lazy scaredy cat. So they were the other pets in the house.
And did you? I'm going to guess you had a lot of fun doing it, yeah?
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Best.
But as I know all too well, doesn't pay all that well. So you have that trade-off.
It didn't pay all that well, but had we known that that would lead to Sister Act, which does pay very well, we would have relaxed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would you say were the big differences in terms of storytelling between writing sitcoms or even writing a musical, but sitcoms in particular, and writing an animated story? What for you are the differences?
Well, I mean,
if any.
The limits are your own imagination. You can do anything.
That's true.
And
yeah, it's really
that's
fun.
Joyful. And the other thing that was neat for us about Teacher's Pet is all three of our children were really young, and it was part of ABC's contract, all network contracts with the FCC, that they have to do a certain amount of educational programming. And so Teacher's Pet held the place of one of ABC's educational shows. So we were paired with an educator who would look at our initial scripts, which we were just trying to tell good stories in a funny way.
Sure.
And he'd say, oh, here's the lesson in it, and see if you can highlight this just a little bit. And he would teach us what we were actually teaching without knowing it. And so it was a really cool experience.
So in other words, there was this additional layer that you would have never considered on Cheers or any of the other sitcoms.
No.
This layer of there's some kind of a message or some thought in here that we need to highlight.
Yeah, and doing some good in the world.
The great thing about Teacher's Pet was they never asked us to dumb it down, and we didn't. We would actually make a lot of those sort of Cheersian references all the time.
Well, you may know that I've got a whole boatload of animation credits, and in fact did work at Disney TV Animation for a while. And the one thing that I prided myself on, and I think the best animation writers do, is not talking down to kids, is to tell good stories. And just there are certain subject matter that you don't want to go into. You probably don't want to do a story about high finance, because that's probably going to go over that audience's head. But you want to tell good stories that are things that you would enjoy. Did you you found the same?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
Okay. So all right. So clearly, at some point in your career, if not more than once, you had some major disaster happen to you. What's the biggest disaster that ever happened that you can think of? And how did you get out of it?
Well, generally you get out of those kind of disasters not by choice. You get fired or sidelined.
Yeah, by saying, I really can't do this. And they go, okay, you don't have to. See you later.
Oh, my God. You just opened up the biggest can of worms.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of... I would...
Like I'm schwitzing just thinking of it.
I wouldn't
PTSD.
say... I don't know. I mean, they never seem like huge... the last show we did was... we did it for Warner Brothers, and we no longer had our buddies from Paramount there all the time, and it was a whole... situation, and we the best thing about it was our parking spot was 5 minutes from our house.
Yeah, location. Well, I'll say this. No, I actually have one, and I think this may be useful to tender-hearted writers. And if we're not tender-hearted, what are we doing being writers? We have to be tender-hearted and thick-skinned. But there was a month. The month was May 2009 in London, England, with a musical that we have mentioned several times in this broadcast.
Yes.
In May of 2009, I cried every single day for very different reasons. And it was really very challenging. On the last day of May 2009, I woke up and I thought, oh, my God, am I going to cry again today? Am I going to make it a whole month? 30 days has September, April, June, and it was May 31st. And instead I had this new idea. And I thought, oh, my God, I'll write a book about it.
There you go.
And I had this idea, and it just suddenly, the worst things could happen, and it would fill me with glee, and I would just smile on the inside, and I would type it all down. And all of a sudden, everybody thought I was being the nicest, quietest little girl and doing like I was told and just typing everything they said. And I was, but for entirely different reasons.
And
So
and is there
that
a book?
idea of, it's going in the book,
Yeah.
is a real lifesaver. Now, the interesting thing that I can tell you now, lo these 8 years later, is I never wrote that book. I don't have to write that book. I don't even want to. But at the time, it got me through.
You got it out of your system.
I got it out of my system, and I found a purpose. All of the pain and all of the drama, I was able to separate myself and look at myself as a character experiencing this. And then it was kind of funny, and it was like, bring it on, guys.
Do you think you could have gotten to that point had you not had all the experiences prior to?
That's why I'm telling this story, because I hope that it'll help somebody else who has maybe cried every day this month.
Oh, gosh.
To find a different way to look at it. I don't know. No, I had never come to that point before, and I did then. Which isn't to say that I haven't had lots of agita since then.
Mm-hmm.
Living well is the best revenge.
But or writing well is the best revenge.
Yeah, right.
Yes, even better.
Ms.
Living well is
Parker.
the best revenge.
But that I think it is about that, being able to take yourself out of the immediate trauma of whatever the job entails.
It's being able to take yourself, A, not so seriously, and B, to step out of, if you can step out of that moment and observe and become an observer, it really does help.
Exactly. You're a participant observer. And so that's the way out of it. It's like, nobody got me out of it. I didn't even really get out of it, but in my head I was out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is all true, but in reality, it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah, sure.
At the time, and then time goes by.
Oh, sure.
It's like a broken heart, basically.
You don't have the benefit of hindsight at all, and so it is hard.
No. All you have is like you're in the, like that joke. It's your day in the barrel. Which the joke I can't tell on the podcast, but it's a great one.
I have an adult rating. You can tell it.
Yeah, well, I don't. Look it up. Look
All
up.
right. Okay.
Your day in the barrel is the punchline.
Okay, we'll definitely look that one up shortly.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what you do today in terms of disciplining yourself to write when you may not feel like writing. What is there any trick that you use to stay disciplined?
Well,
Billy, this one's yours.
Yeah, this is totally me. This is so I've been writing about growing up in the 60s in Chicago, a memoir that my son suggested, and it's going pretty well now, but for a long time it was difficult. And I discovered two things. One, Cheri sent me this, because she sends me stuff all the time. I don't know if Jerry Seinfeld came up with this, or if he just refined it or passed it on or whatever, but it's connected to him, and you can find it online, I'm sure. And it's all about, you set a goal every day, like a writing goal, like 1,000 words. I'm going to write 1,000 words that day. And you may write more, but you never write less. And then you X off every day that you do that you accomplish that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then
on a big year,
you literally get a big calendar
that has the whole year at a glance.
Yeah, a year at a glance, and you X off each day with the big red X. And I would say, writing by myself, I probably never wrote more than, 3 or 4 days in a row. And then I would say, you can take off, blah, blah, do this, that, and the other thing. And now I'm up to almost 300 days in a row doing that.
Wow.
At least 1,000, and sometimes way more than that. And sometimes it's just writing, and sometimes it's, it's like not usable or anything, but it's writing. And the other thing is, I think this came from a writer named Nora Roberts. I'm sorry.
Nora Roberts.
Who says simply, ass in chair.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put your ass in the chair. And it's like, that is really, really true, because I was doing the extra enough of the days, and that was going well, but the thing that really makes it much better is to commit the time to it and not, fool around and do other things and go off for 2.5 hours or whatever, and just do that. And that's amazing. That's really, it's not easy, but it truly works, because I really believe that you learn about writing by writing, not by, that's the big lie, basically. In the movies, right? In the movies, this guy's trying to, usually a typewriter, type, no, pulls it out, scrumples up, no, crumbles it up, throws it away, until finally, aha, and then he writes like crazy. Well, doesn't really work that way.
No.
I mean, sometimes it does, but very often it doesn't. And so you kind of, you as you're trying to write are comparing yourself to this model that's not really true. And when you have a writing partner, it's much easier. Not easier, but it's different and you always have the other person. They're responding to the thing you're working on together. They're the audience already. Whereas when you're writing by yourself, you're like, I don't know, is this stupid or not? I don't know. So that's what I would advise, basically. I mean, they're really, really, really helpful.
I've been teaching that line for years. The formula, the secret formula to success in writing, is ass liberally applied to chair. That's
no,
very good.
It's totally true. I mean, it's hard to believe in some ways, but once you do it, then you go like, oh yeah, that's why writing is hard.
Do you
you're putting yourself in a situation like, I'd much rather be outside.
I think there's
looking at the moon or whatever.
There's no substitute for just doing the work. I mean, there's just no. You can't go down to the corner store, down to the corner story store and buy a story. You have to do it. Do you find that the fact that you've gone 300 days of doing that, do you feel like you're a stronger writer? Do you feel like you're getting better at doing that?
Oh yeah. No, I'm not every day, but in aggregate, and certainly at the last. I mean, everything took so much longer. It really takes way longer than writing in TV. I'll write page after page of stuff. Sometimes, in order to get going, I'll just sort of outline what I think a story is going to be. One of the chapters, I like, because they're all basically based on things that really happened in my life and exploring that. But I would, if I couldn't do anything else, I would outline it, and then the next day, if I couldn't really make progress, I would outline it again, and sometimes within the outlining it again, I would make more progress. And if you keep doing that, and you commit to it for a long time, sometimes you get a really good idea, and you're like, holy shit, I got a good idea. I can't believe it. And so that's been much more so now, like, 300 days, almost 300 days into the process. I'd say especially the past couple of months. I mean, my discovery in writing book was, at first, like, this is just dumb stories about my friends and stuff like that. And then one day, I finally got it. I finally thought to myself, oh, I can work the material. It's material that I can work, as opposed to just because when you start in a memoir, you just write down everything you remember, which is, surprising. And like, this interesting at all? I don't know. So you write all that down. And then when you start to, like rewrite it sort of, when I finally got the thing, I'm like, oh, I can rework. I'm not tied down to the absolute truth because, A, there is no absolute truth. If you had 9 people who were at the same event, you might get 9 different stories.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter. Like that old saying, when it comes to the truth and legend, always print the legend.
Yeah.
That's sort of my mantra in this. Like, I'm gonna do the sort of fun part, the sort of interesting part, the little bit over the top part. Even though the basic nugget is definitely from something that definitely happened to me in that period of time.
Right. Okay, I think that's really spectacular advice for anybody out there, for sure. My guess is that you have met and worked with any number of quirky or oddball people throughout your career, and I'm wondering if you might have one story that you're able to tell about something that happened to you along the way, anything that you can share that would be a lot of fun for the listeners to hear.
Well, I always love this story. David Lloyd, the father of Christopher Lloyd, one of the creators of Modern Family, was a consultant. He did the Chuckles episode of Mary Tyler Moore Show, Talking Bites the Dust, and I mean, just renowned writer, and he would come in once a week and help us punch up stuff, and sometimes he would do scripts too. And such a Dickensian character. I mean, unbelievably Dickensian. He could fit right into it, bigger than life, basically. And so he came to the run-through one time, and he's sitting there, and we need one of the waitresses to go in the bar and deliver, the beer to somebody. And she says, like, I don't know. I mean, like, why am I doing this? What's my reasoning? Why am I coming from this point to go to that point and the whole thing? Looking for, I don't know, a line or logic or something like that. And we're all like dumbfounded, like, and David Lloyd says, "It's all pretend. It's all made up."
Yes.
That was true then. It's true about comedy. It's true about show business. It's true about religion. It's true about raising your children. It's all made up. So, don't get too bent out of shape about it, basically.
In that light, there's allegedly I don't know whether it's a true story or apocryphal that it might have been Paul Newman on Torn Curtain was working with Hitchcock and said, "Hitch, what's my motivation in this scene?" And Hitchcock said, "It's the $100,000 that we're paying you."
Your paycheck.
Yeah.
So I think that's very funny.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, so we're coming toward the end of the show, and I've been speaking with Cheri and Bill Steinkellner, who it's just been an incredible amount of fabulous information we've heard today. I'm wondering if you have a great piece of advice or a tip that you can lend to the listeners that would help them, especially those starting out in the business or trying to find their way.
Yes, I do. Several years ago, on Sister Act, I met a young man who had been a dancer in 5 Broadway shows, and we began a pen palship because he was living in New York and I was living alternately in Santa Barbara and sometimes in London when I was working there on Sister Act.
And crying.
And he was often in London as well because he was the associate director on that show. And he, in our pen palship, I had observed that he was really a good writer of emails and notes and show notes and things like that. And I just asked him, "Have you ever written?" And he did not go to college. And he had tried to write an essay once, and he sent it to me. I said, "This is really good. I think you're a writer." And it turned out, as we got to know each other better, that he always dated writers and edited their work, but did not write himself. And he would edit his boyfriends, but he would not write his own things because he thought that was what somebody with a college degree does. And but I could tell that the things that he wanted in life had to do with expressing himself, voice, creativity. And I said, "I just think you should write." And I got him started on Morning Pages, Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, where
Great
you
book.
write 3 pages every morning, no matter what, you just write. And one day I was in London, and I think he was in New York at the time, and he sent me something. He says, "This came into my Morning Pages, or this came out while I was writing Morning Pages today. I don't know what it is." And I read it, and I said, "It's chapter 1. Keep going." And every day he would send me his Morning Pages, and I would say, "Keep going, keep going, keep going." That ended up becoming his first novel, which never sold, got put in a box under his bed, but did catch the eye of an agent who said, "I think you have a voice to write for young adults, for middle grade, and for kids." And so he started working on a book that is set in Pittsburgh.
Really?
About a young boy who runs away from home to go to New York and try out for a Broadway show.
Huh.
And it's called Better Nate Than Ever. And it's Tim Federle. He has since written so many things I can't even keep count anymore in many media, including Tequila Mockingbird.
Wow.
Where he called me up and he said, "I have an idea." No, actually, we were together here in Santa Barbara, I think. And he said, "I have an idea for a cocktail book, which would use famous literature. It would be like an English major's cocktail book. Well, I'm an English major. So I said, okay, you're going to have to do a lot of reading. But he figured it the heck out. And so 2 things about that. He was willing to do whatever it took.
Yeah.
And that was thing 1, and that's all on him. He was also really smart enough to find a friend who wouldn't judge it, who wouldn't say, I think it would be better if you put this here, but instead just said, keep going. And I received his work every day, and sometimes I would just put highlights on the things that I noticed or that jumped out on me, but I never commented at all. I just said, keep going, keep going, keep going. And I think it's really important to both be a person who is willing to keep going and to find somebody else out there in the world who will help you to remember to keep going.
That is, I think that is such true and wise advice, and thank you for saying it, because I think that encouragement is what's missing in a lot of people who have talent but don't feel like they're getting any encouragement. You just have to keep going.
Can I plug a podcast?
Please do.
It's our son Teddy Steinkellner. It's called New Rankings, like ranking something. New Rankings with Teddy.
Okay.
And it's on iTunes, right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean, and I've been on it, and Cheri's been on it. The various family members have been on it, but also a number of other experts have been on it. And it's hard to describe, but it's really funny, and it's got philosophy, and it's got mothering, and it's got all kinds of great stuff on it. So they won't be disappointed.
Well done, Dad.
New Rankings,
thanks.
is that all one word?
New Rankings, with Teddy.
No, New Rankings is 2 different words.
2 different words.
Yeah, that's right.
New Rankings with Teddy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody check that out after they've checked out this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. We'll be plugging this.
Well, I want to thank the both of you, Cheri and Bill, so much for coming on the show today. This has been absolutely one of the greatest hours of my life.
Oh, Steve.
Steve, you got to get out more.
I do. It's a sad, sad life that I lead. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Well, good. I'm glad. And you have a great day, and talk to you soon.
Thanks so much,
Thanks.
Steve.
Take
Bye,
care.
Steve.
Today's StoryBeat tip. Producers look for writers who have a unique voice when presenting a story. That doesn't mean the audience will easily be able to tell one screenwriter's work from the next, but an audience can innately tell when they are watching and hearing a clear, unique voice. So how and where does one acquire a unique voice? No one can teach you to have your own voice. No books or courses can teach you to find your voice. It's up to you as an artistic individual to take what you have and develop your own style, your own way of expression, your own point of view, and your own unique way of telling stories. Most people have their own way of storytelling, and most people are natural-born storytellers. The problem is that the majority of people never develop their own voices in a way that makes them marketable, assuming they wish to be read or heard at all. Successful writers do exactly that by developing the voice with which they were born. I recommend that you do the same by writing as much as you can. All it takes is passion, dedication, and endless hours of hard work. And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. This podcast would not have been possible without the generous support of the Center for Media Innovation on the campus of Point Park University. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.